Welcome to the How to Heal podcast, the show where we explore real life stories and practical tools to thrive. I'm your host, Lindsay Tremarky Richter, and through over a 15-year journey of all things healing, I'm here to hook it up. If you're feeling overwhelmed, looking for a deeper connection, or straight up in a psycho-spiritual crisis, I got you covered. Let's unearth your unique elixir to purpose, peace, and progress. Here we go. Hey, what's up? Here we go. We're talking about spirituality today and what that means in regards to sort of these pillars that we're going through. I want to start with this because my husband asked me last night at dinner, he said, "What is spirituality?" And I said, spirituality is the conversation that you have with yourself in the presence of a higher power. And I think that's just sort of a fragment of what spirituality is. But needless to say, it is deeply personal and it is not something to be dictated. And that's sort of where my issue with religion came when I started to hear things that didn't speak to my heart and didn't feel good in my heart, but I had to accept them because they were part of my religion. That being said, I think religion has a really beautiful place for teaching, especially children, ways to be connected with God and prayer and lessons. And, I'm not going to go off on my tangent on religion, but needless to say, I'm no longer religious. And I wouldn't even say I wouldn't even describe, it's almost like when you're like talking to a hipster back in the day and you're like, "Oh, you're a hipster." And the hipster's like, "What is that?" It's the same thing about spirituality. Like, I don't want to be like, "Oh, I'm spiritual," because I don't feel like that. I feel like it's all encompassing. Everything that I do, every moment that I breathe, every step that I take, and all of these other pillars that we talk about are protecting my vessel to be connected to a higher power. That's where the new answers are. We've been on the earth, long enough. We're evolving now to the point where there are different ways of being, different ways of thinking, different ways of feeling, different ways of communicating, different ways of all the things relating to each other. And that is the reason that I'm here making this passion project, birthing this, because I have my belief system and my identity has been stricken from me in numerous occasions. And as we go through, and now I'm thinking of what story am I going to tell after this? So many stories, right? About how I have crumbled to the ground and having to pick myself back up. I don't even want to say like a phoenix rising from the ashes because it's just happened so many times that I'm really here to give you guys some practical advice on what it means to build your spiritual practice, build the conversation that you have with yourself when no one is watching and you feel inspired, not being scared of that, being able to hold a continuous thread of amazing thoughts that's connected and inspired. That's spirituality. And when we look to the physical for the groundedness and the mental, for the clarity and the certainty, and the emotional for the relief and calmness and love, that all lies in the spiritual pillar. However, we are human, living a physical life in a physical world, and need to tend to those pillars just as much as spirituality. We need a grounded approach to spirituality. So, this is what How to Heal is based on, because we need to heal our physical, mental, emotional, and bodies in order to really channel the spiritual lessons that we are here to learn. It can be very scary to come face to face with yourself and take complete self accountability. It can be very scary to feel a certain way and to feel that you know what's right, but that it doesn't feel like an option because it's just way too scary. Marianne Williamson was saying people will take a false sense of hope over no hope. And that's where we have to do the work. Living a spiritual life, living an integrated life, living a healthy life, healing requires integration. It's not just like, oh, I understand that concept. Now I'm healed. It's not how it works. We need to feel the concepts in our body. We need to understand them mentally. We need to process how we feel about them, and we need to embody them. So when we talk about spirituality, that is how we embody healing. There is more to everything than we're seeing, right? If you're listening to this podcast, most likely like you're there or you're about to get there. Like we're not all as it seems. There's a little bit more mystery to life than what we can touch and feel and pay for. So I don't have all the answers. And that's the beautiful thing about being alive. We're going to find them out together. But I know that when I act or engage in a certain behavior or thought, that there is a consequence to that vibration. And that's, karma 101. But the what I keep hearing is that it's going to get faster and faster and faster. Those results are going to be immediate. And we will have no choice but to look in the mirror and say, am I living a life of integrity? Like, doesn't feel good anymore. This doesn't feel good anymore. Like, all these old ways of being isn't working anymore. What's the next door? What's the next door to walk through? What's the only door to walk through? For me, it was no alcohol. And yeah, those decisions are not fun, not popular, you know, not popular. People don't like to hear that Lindsay's not drinking anymore. But again, the complete self accountability that is driven by a deep knowing, a deep connectedness to a bigger essence of life that we are surrounded and enveloped by, and that will hold us and nurture us through the hard times when we're doing the work that we need to do. There is an expansiveness in the world. There is an expansiveness of the universe if we are allowing ourselves to see it, to experience it, if we are open to it. If we allow ourselves to be enchanted by the mysterious. When we talk about spirituality, there's a lot of unhinged people in the world that are spiritual. I love that. I don't know where I saw it. It was on Instagram or something, but it's like, yeah, like not everyone who's spiritual is good. Demons are spiritual too. And it's funny, like it's the truth. There are people who can read energy, who are in touch with bigger chess pieces at play that are not on good missions. I don't mean to scare you, but like I've sort of like faced it front on, like head on in so many different ways. I keep going, what story am I going to tell today? What story am I going to tell today? But like when we have that core health and integrity of I am doing the things again, physically, mentally, emotionally, I'm taking care of my energy, I'm cleaning up. It is very difficult for any external sources to knock that being down. And then when we talk about rules of karma, that ultimately ends up taking care of itself for somebody who's not in integrity and acting from a place of, you know, malfeasance. But I do want to mention just some ABCs of spirituality and what that means, because I think I'm getting very philosophical here, but I don't know how else to really broach the subject. I have a note here. The ability to listen to spirituality is the ability to listen to your inner voice, your intuition. And that intuition, so many times, is the last thing that you want to hear. And it's a quiet whisper that you just barely can grasp. So building that muscle, that intuitive muscle of what was that? Let me go back. Because I remember when I first started to play in this arena before I even knew what the term spirituality meant, like in my 20s, it felt so overwhelming and I felt so sad and I felt so overwhelmed and like, oh my God, like despair. Like I'm never going to be able to get there. The intuition would come and it would be in one ear, out the other instantaneously. And I knew I missed it. It was like a wind that like went through my being and it was like so fast. And I was like, oh, how am I ever going to grasp this? Now I've mastered all of the other parts of my health where I'm able to be like, okay, I'm grounded enough to hear what is being said that I need to hear to make my next move, to move through the world as it is right now. We are living in a completely different place than we were in 2005 and 2000 or 1985. You know what I'm saying? Like from 1980 to now is my 20s was like the 80s and my 30s was like the 90s. My 20s were a complete mess. And my 30s were also a little sloppy, but like kind of more melancholic, like grungy. I'm just thinking of like music and that analogy. But like think about where we've come from as a society, as how we function in the world through technology from 1980. It's 45 years ago. Whew, mama, breathe it in. It's a lot. And we know AI is going to, speed things up ever more, which is why, as a race, as the human race, we need to step up in the way we're functioning. Like data entry is no longer sufficient, right? Like we have to be able to operate on a new plane, on a new level of consciousness, on new ways of thinking, of new ways of being. So spirituality is really like a lighthouse. It is. It is a lighthouse to be like, okay, there it is. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I can go and I can just touch base really quick. I know I'm supported. I know I'm loved. I know there's a safety net underneath me that I can't see. When the physical gets too hard, when the mental gets too hard, it's when you're feeling too heavy. There's the lighthouse. There's my help. There's my team. They've got my back. And this practice is going to help you get to knowing those beings, knowing those peoples, knowing your peoples on the other side. There's a lot of support for all of us. And spirituality is the pillar in which we access that information. And, I think when we talk about living in this new world, living, creating change, seeing things that we want to see, not destruction, but hope and love and good times and happiness and joy and fun and funniness and all the things that we want in our life. It's it's being in integrity. It's being in integrity. It's knowing who you are, knowing you're making the right decisions for the right reasons. And again, this is not something that you'll understand logically. Like, yeah, we can talk about the mental aspects of conversation around what this means, but this is an embodiment. This is a philosophy that needs to be integrated on all the different levels that we talk about on this podcast. So I am thinking about the story that I want to tell. I'm just thinking about like, I don't know, getting high, right? Like in my 20s. Like I didn't really drink or smoke too much when I was in high school, but once I got to college, I was like, all right, this is what This is what college is for. Let me chill. And so many times I would chill a blunt or a bong hit or whatever it was, and I would just like this dread would like come over me, like the fear. And it was so intense. I don't know why that's coming to mind. I guess it's coming to mind because I'm relating it to those times when I would be just not able to grasp the messages, not able to download the messages, not able to hear the intuitive whisper, not wanting to sit still enough to receive the message. And what we learn as we come into this practice, as we respect our body as our temple more and more, is that it's actually more fun to live that way. Because when we consume substance, we have to recalibrate our way back into baseline. And it just takes so much time and energy. I'm not saying sobriety is for everyone. I'm just saying understand that when you take substance, your body needs to recalibrate to a baseline. And that energy is typically very unhinged. During that time, so it's like a called the moral hangover, super unhinged. So yeah, would I take back the times that I partied in college? No, I wouldn't. Well, how could I? I wouldn't be who I am today. But I'm here to tell you, like, it is brighter on the other side. It is brighter on the other side. So many fires I've walked through, and it's been intense. It's been intense. I think a lot of us are just scared waiting. Like we're like sitting ducks waiting for the next thing to happen. But my vibe was like, I'm gonna run into explosions and see like how I come out on the other side. It's kind of how like I've functioned. I'm not saying that I do not recommend that. I do not recommend that, but it allowed me to gain this strength and stability that even in the craziest of times, I was able to withstand and not get blown over. So here's my story. And it was 2020. And I, we were just coming. I could feel as I'm speaking about this, I feel the COVID ness of that time. And I was not well. I mean, I'm not sure really who was. I think we endured a very severe trauma to the system. I remember my daughter had been born. We were renovating our house. We just moved to Long Island, and it was like, oh, this is only me a month. No, 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 it's only me like 3 months. Okay, like at the most a year. At the most a year. Like we couldn't even fathom it at that point. And we all know it was like 3 years. So I am in the thick of it and I'm looking for meaning. I'm working in corporate. I'm have a new a baby that's under a year old. I um am just physically, had gained weight, gone through a pregnancy, just really looking for something, for some sort of happiness, some sort of baseline, some sort of what we talk about, right? Like the false hope rather than no hope. And I got in on the Clubhouse trend. And Clubhouse was the Wild West. You were just on there in whatever capacity you worked in or wanted to be on there and just talking. And I was up there talking. I had my website up. I was, I was coaching. I was in coaching containers. I was trying to do my thing. Although while I was still working commercial real estate, I was really coming out of the spiritual closet at that point, publicly, at least on socials. And I fell prey to basically like a psychic scammer it was intense. I I did all the things, like the stars aligned for me in a way in that situation that was just so karmic that it couldn't have happened any other way. Like even in my own personal time with myself where I was meditating and I was doing all the things and I was reading my tarot and I was journaling every day and doing all the things, exercising, eating, intuitive eating, all the things. It was still like walk through the door, walk through the door. All the signs pointed to yes. And I just said, okay, I'm going through the door. And it was clear, it was probably the biggest bear trap I had ever walked into. But at the same time, it was the most grounded I had ever responded in a situation like that. And my bouts with, mental illness and all the things could have easily risen to the surface, but I was so grounded in my other practices that we talk about here that this was not going to derail my life. And I basically was scammed out of a lot of money and a lot of things. And I would say I am so grateful for my practices and my ability to hold my stuff together at that time because I could have lost everything. And I didn't. And I rebuilt and on the other end, the important things came back and the the faith of my husband was broken, but ultimately, like, we got through that and we got through that quick. And I'm so proud of my husband. And I tell that story because, if you're a spiritual person married to somebody who is not spiritual, like, have faith, ask, ask spirit, be like, I talk to your partner, um, while you journal, talk to them while you pray for them, talk to their soul. They will come through, they will listen. And I am just in awe of how multifaceted the world that we live in is, and just how miraculous things can be in the physical realm. Because though while we're spiritual beings, we are living in a physical world. And the physical world is where we see the miracles. Like, spiritual world is a miracle. Like, it just is. It's the divine all-knowing presence. But the physical that we live in, that is where we see the science of how the spiritual manifests. So I'm going to end there. I could keep talking for hours on this, but we'll see you in the next episode. I love you.